Hello everyone, I'm Chloe Johnson and welcome to this Fresh Business Thinking webinar series, Lockdown Learning for Businesses, supported by BT. Fresh Business Thinking is proud to be a part of Skills for Tomorrow by BT, which is helping 10 million people in the UK make the most of life in the digital world. Working with us and other leading digital skills, enterprise and community organisations, BT has created and collated some of the best advice, information and support in one easy place to navigate. It's easy for anyone to access our webinars as well as discover other ways they or their family and friends can grow their confidence and skills to make the most of tech. All it takes to get started is to visit www.bt.com/skills for tomorrow or by clicking on the link in the comments section. Coronavirus has been a real challenge for businesses and entrepreneurs across the UK. At Fresh Business Thinking, we're used to putting on events, sharing expertise and encouraging and supporting networking. Throughout the pandemic, we knew this simply couldn't just stop. Perhaps more than ever, this is a time when as a business community, we need to come together and support one another. And we're lucky enough to work with organisations and individuals who are passionate about supporting entrepreneurs during this difficult time. One of those is our speakers today, Peter Ibbetson and Tetteh Kofi from JournalLink. Peter was the face in the media for one of the high street banks for several years and perfected the art of getting his messages landed. As one of the founders of JournalLink, he now helps businesses with their media messages and convinces journalists to write about them in the way the business wants. With a background in brand marketing, print and broadcast journalism, Tetteh brings balance to the group and articulates the needs and wants of businesses and journalists. His focus is on keeping journalists engaged with small business by helping businesses tell their story in an engaging, attention-getting way. Today, Peter and Tetteh will share with you some key tips that journalists look for in press releases and how you as an interviewee can build your confidence and control an interview. Peter and Tetteh will be talking for around 30 minutes and then we'll have some time for Q&A. If you do have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we'll do our best to get to them later on in the session. That's all from me for now and I'll pass over to you, Peter and Tetteh.
Thank you.
Well, that's Peter.
That's good. Over to you, Tetteh. You can start us off.
And I'm Tetteh. Look, one of the things that's always interested me is how smart entrepreneurs are, how savvy they are, how worldly wise they are. But the thing that's always shocked me is how little they know about the media. So the reason Peter and I are together today is to chat over, with me as a journalist, what I would like to hear from a business. And then with Peter speaking as the businessman, what he can do to get his messages across and landed. Peter, is that fair?
I think it absolutely is. So tell us what you look for from the journalist side.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. The first thing is everybody's got to understand is that nobody gets into journalism as because they couldn't find anything else to do. Journalism is populated by people usually on some kind of mission. And when you become a journalist, you're not in journalism to be unread, unwatched, unnoticed, and so on. So the whole idea of being in my job is that I want people to read what I put out, watch what I put out, and hopefully these days increasingly to share. Now, that is a clue to what I need from you as a business. What's your mission as a businessman, Peter?
So the way I sort of look at this is there's two ways of getting your brand known. And the most important thing is that you get your head in the right place and understanding how you're going to manage the journalist, how you're going to get your message over. Two things to think about here are two ways to get your brand known. One is you can pay for advertising and you can go and pay for your email distributions and things like that, pay people to do that. The other side is actually using other people's views on you. So PR, trying to get journalists to say good things about you. One of the things that I learned when I was doing a lot of interviewing for what was quite a damaged brand at the time was that people didn't listen to a word that I said, right? So advertising doesn't really work anymore. What we're driven by nowadays in trying to get our brand known is what other people say about our brand. So, Trustpilot and the reviews that you read when you buy things on Amazon. So on the one side, you've got advertising you can pay for. Always see PR, not as a free ride, but see PR as earned PR. So when you're dealing with journalists, you have got to earn their confidence, and you've got to earn those things that they say about you. And what you're striving for all the time is to get a journalist, whether it's in broadcast or whether it's in an article, to say good things about you. And if you can get them doing that, that's worth about 5 times the value of you doing standard advertising. So number one thing in your head is you've got to earn this. It's not a free ride. You've got to work hard at getting your messages over to engage with the journalist.
Okay. Now, that's another great tip. Now, the next thing businesses have to understand is that every journalist, every medium, every platform has its quirks. They each have an angle on life, a perception on life, an editorial viewpoint on life. So when you try and get in touch with the media, you don't need to get in touch with all of the media. You only need to get in touch with the media that chimes with you. And I'll tell you a secret about what journalists do. I spend maybe more than 50% of my time looking at what my colleagues do, because my colleagues understand what is news. My colleagues are breaking news all the time. However, news is like an elephant. If you hold its trunk, you think it's a long rope. If you lean up against its side, you think it's a wall. If you stand up against its leg, you think that it's a tree trunk. The point of that is that there are many different angles on news. So if you connect with one journalist effectively or one platform effectively, guess what? Everybody else will be queuing up to watch it. So connect with the ones that chime with what you do, understand your ethos, you understand their ethos. And please don't get in touch with a medium, a platform, a newspaper, a broadcaster without understanding what that program's shtick is, so you can connect with it in a way that tells your story. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, several good angles there. And we may well come back to this point about how do you get to the right media and how do you choose that. But I'm going to pick up 2-3 points here. First thing is that piece about addressing your audience and knowing who you're talking to. And when I say who you're talking to, I mean both the journalist you're talking to, whether that's a print interview, and your audience as well, whether that's a broadcast interview or whether that's an article that's going to get written. Knowing who you are talking to, knowing what your target audience is so important about how you actually deliver what you as an interviewee are going to deliver. So have that in mind. Know your audience, prep for the audience. But the piece I want to pick up here is Ted's talking to you as a journalist here about how he's thinking and what's important to him. One of the things I picked up was that, and I promise you this, if any of you watching go onto the television or onto the radio or even into a print article and have that interview, I promise you, everybody's going to say you did really well. Even if you think you made a complete hash of it, everyone you know, family, kids, friends, will say you did well. But if that journalist doesn't create good broadcasts, that's their career, right? So the journalist is there not to shoot you down in flames, but to create good broadcast. And your job is to help that journalist create a good article, create good broadcast, do a good piece, but with your messages. Right. So the way I used to look at this, whenever I go into an interview, whatever kind of interview it is, the way I would look at it is that this is my gig and I have some messages to land, but critically, I am the journalist's pimp in this. And my fundamental role here is to make the journalist look good and help the journalist to create a good piece and good broadcast, but with my messages. So there's 2 hats that are worn here. One is person like me that's trying to land the messages, people like yourselves trying to land the messages. The other one is the journalist trying to do his job well.
Now, this goes, what Peter's saying is absolutely crucial. And it would have sounded self-serving if I had said that myself, but he gets it because he was very effective as a business broadcaster. Now, my job as a journalist is to educate, entertain, and inform. Earlier on, he mentioned something about earning your coverage. You earn your coverage by saying something that will enable the journalist to educate, entertain, and inform their audience. So one of the things that a lot of businesses struggle with is that they're nervous when they're around journalists. Journalists are perfectly ordinary people like me. We don't come from planet Zog. We have wives and children. We hug and kiss our babies. So when you're speaking to a journalist, a lot of people kind of tend to freeze and imagine that they are for the slaughter or for the chop. It's not like that at all, especially from an audience like that we have in this seminar. Will people be hanging on your every word to make their investments? Can you affect the value of sterling or dollars by the utterances that you make? Are you a SPAD, a special political advisor for a government? Are you in one of those must-watch sectors like big business, finance, pharmacology, heavy industry? If you're not in those sectors, understand that the journalist understands that you are somebody that I want to support. Remember, if I have you on my radio show or on my TV show and you freeze, who looks bad? They'll forgive you, but I have to speak to the producer and the editor afterwards. So when you talk with the journalist, please feel at ease. Please tell your story. Please educate, entertain, and inform. And don't feel as if this is going to be adversarial unless, well, none of you are Bill Gates, none of you are Jeff Bezos, you know, none of you are Mr. Soros. So you're a small business. What the kind of medium you will be talking to will be looking for a way of helping you up. So please, please, please relax. And that is very, very important. Of course, there is one thing you have to remember. Let's say you're in the fashion business and you start making bikinis for 4-year-olds and things like that. Please do expect me to ask you, do you think that this is appropriate for young kids to be dressed up in ways like this? So, of course, you've got to pay attention to the social image of the business that you're presenting. Just because you're a small business doesn't mean that you can walk into a media platform and do and say anything you like. You always have to be responsible. But beyond that, please feel at ease, and you'll find that you'll give the journalist better stuff for him to put out content, and you'll give the platform better stuff which viewers would like to enjoy. Peter?
Yeah, so we probably sort of set the sweat rolling down the backs of your necks with these sort of things about saying enjoy it and be confident. And, you know, if I'm dead honest about it, I did a lot of interviews for a sort of 6-7 year period in quite difficult times. And every interview, if you didn't go in, again, whether it be a print interview or whether it's a broadcast live recorded, whatever it was, if you weren't going in prepared, you know, you weren't ready to do this. And every interview I did, I'd still feel those hairs on the back of my neck would be up. And that's great, because that's how it should be. But whilst that pressure's there, as Tet said, enjoy it and have confidence doing it. Because...
Can I tell you what happened with Peter? Sorry to interrupt, Peter.
No, go on.
I interviewed Peter before. This was at the time where the financial crash had taken place. Worked for a big bank in the United Kingdom. The world believed that it was the bankers who had brought us all to the brink of extinction. They were the coronavirus of the day. It was open season on bankers. Now, because he had such a stellar position, he had such a high profile position, the pressure on him was completely different to the pressure on you. And it is from that point of view that Peter's talking about prepping. But the lessons he learned from that are lessons we can all benefit from. Good prep, knowing what your points are, and so on and so forth. Sorry,
yeah, no, I was going to say exactly that. Look, the pressure was on me quite a lot in those interviews, but that doesn't diminish the need for prep. I know Jen's just put a question through on the chat here about, you know, how do you avoid the drift and how much prep do you need? You need as much prep as you can put in. So, you know, as we've said, this is earned PR. This isn't, you know, you get an interview with a newspaper. It's not you walking in saying to the journalist, okay, print this for me, please, because there's an advert for my business. You've got to earn it. You've got to give them the story that's going to make their readers read that article. Otherwise, you're never going to get in. So the prep is really important. And in the context of that prep, the process you need to go to, first of all, is the audience. You know, who are you talking to? How have you got to present this? What are they going to read? What perceptions do they have of you? So who is your audience and who do you want to impact? There's no point in you going, if you're going to one of Tett's radio programs, for instance, and if this is Bloomberg, you know, and you're selling Christmas gifts, well, you're never going to connect. So you've got to be on the right medium, presenting your story to the audience you want. So number one is the audience. The next thing is what messages you want to land. So really think through what messages, 2 or 3 messages, one if it's just one, but no more than 3. What do you want to land in this article that will be brand enhancing for your business? And then it gets on to Jen's point that she's asked about. How do you avoid drifting off on this? And that's quite simply, you control it. So you define what the agenda is. Now, pretty well every interview, as I got into these, every interview I did, I had thought about how I am going to run this interview, not how the journalist is going to run the interview. And that's not to say that you sort of take over and you know, take over their job, but it's provide good broadcast for them based on your messages. And every time I went to an interview, the first question that I would be asked, I'd always land in the first answer, just in a 15-second slot, the 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about. I wouldn't ignore the question, but I'd take that initial question, just turn it around a bit and say, look, but the 2 or 3 important things are 1, 2, and 3. And that agenda's been set. And once you've set that agenda, then, Jen, you can control this without drifting off into difficult areas. And we'll talk a bit later maybe about those difficult areas in the Q&As. But once you're controlling that, then you are landing your messages. Now, in my experience, and Ted will comment on this, but in my experience, once you've landed those points, actually the journalist invariably will come back to you on those points that you've landed because they're after a good conversation with you. So, you know, again, Ted, you tell us, are you really going to try and kill me in questions, or are you trying to create that broadcast? And if I've told you the basis of the broadcast, you are happy.
Okay, here's the thing. Peter's absolutely right here. Journalists know a little bit about almost anything and everything in the world, but they can't do a story without a subject matter expert, somebody who's been there, seen it, done that, is doing that right now. So when I prep for an interview, I have a series of 3, 4, 5 talking points. Now, this is based on the research that I have done. I will have looked at a LinkedIn profile, Twitter feed, Facebook page, Instagram page, the company's website that I'm about to talk about. Based on that, I would kind of rock up with a group of questions which I think make interesting discussion about that particular company and the individual who is in front of me. Okay. However, it is only the starting point, because it is the answers you give to my talking points that really directs the interview. So if you have compelling and interesting things to say to me, I'll chuck away my talking points and I will go with the conversation. And when people are talking in that way, certainly on radio and on television, the optics of that are absolutely riveting. It looks like 2 people who are having a conversation. So this is not, again, unless you are special political advisor, unless you are head of a multinational brand which is being questioned over issues around the environment or something of that nature, unless you are a big pharmaceutical brand, and I don't have to mention what's being discussed about big pharmaceutical brands around the world right now. If you're a small business, most people want to know what's genuinely interesting. Now, remember, you have experiences with your customers. You have case studies of things that you have done. You have research that you have made. You have experiences that you have had and you didn't make them up. All of this stuff is very compelling. Tell us what the challenges are. Tell us what the pitfalls have been, and most importantly, share your successes. Now, it depends what kind of platform you're in as to what's interesting. You know, if you're going on a breakfast show in the morning, please do not tell stories that may make people want to jump out the window and gut themselves. You know, at breakfast, you want to keep people up. You want something lively. You want something that's interesting. The further down you come in the day, however, people are, you know, have got the stomach for heavier news and so on and so forth. So again, this goes back to researching, who am I talking to? What's this newspaper about? What are the quirks of this particular journal? And then align whatever your story is to the needs and interests of that paper. It'll catch fire. Not only that, here's a great thing. Once you give a journalist a good experience, you go in the black book. The black book in this case is a good book because they know that you can give them what they need. Not only that, occasionally I ring up fellow journalists and say, look, I need a story about whatever it is, you know, health issues or diets or lifestyle issues or holiday options and so on. Do you know anybody? Okay. We swap names with each other all the time. All the time. So all you need to do is to deal well with the journal in front of you, and by osmosis, you will just pass through the community. It's very closely knit. Peter?
Yeah, I'm picking up three things out of this. You are the subject expert. Okay, so you've been asked to ask for an interview because you are the subject expert. Believe that. Don't be shy. You are there, and trust me, the journalist thinks, even if you don't know more than they do, the journalist thinks you do, and the audience thinks you do as well. So get out there, be confident, and be that subject expert. They need you, journalists need you for the story more than you need them. So just bear that in mind, your gig. Second thing I'm going to say here, and again, it's something that Tett's pulled out here, that, you know, if you're a politician, or to some extent, as I found myself with, as being a hated banker, they'll go for you, right? They'll go for you. As a business that's doing great things in the high street, they won't go for you. So let me sort of put that in the position, right? So if you're listening to Nick Robinson, for instance, or John Humphreys, I used to sort of face John Humphreys a few times. If you're listening to Nick Robinson, John Humphreys, one of those guys that you hear on Radio 4, and the politicians there, we're all sitting there listening to this, really pitching for the interviewer to take the politician apart and embarrass them. 5 minutes later, they may have a business on there that they're talking to. They change completely the way they interview the business. And if they go for the business, we're all sitting there listening to this saying, what a nasty person that interviewer is going for that business. So we actually change the color of our approach on this, which is we just love interviewers to go and bash the politicians and, you know, the hated bankers. On the other hand, we hate the interviewers trying to embarrass an inexperienced interviewee. So it's not in the interviewer's interest at all to go and take you apart, all right? So, you know, again, have the confidence there. You are helping that journalist create good broadcast, and I promise you, if you have that great conversation with them, then you'll have a really easy ride and you'll get your messages landed. Make sure you land your messages, make sure you control it, and you'll get those through. The third thing I want to say is just in terms of the prep, that you've heard from Tett as the journalist, how he does his prep, and he looks at all your social media areas. So he looks at your Twitter, your Facebook, things like that. Be alive to that. Be alive to that. Because too many times people go into an interview, print, broadcast, whatever it is, without having thought about the fact that a journalist or a researcher might just have had a look at their past a little bit and might have some questions up their sleeve that might be unpleasant questions for you. They won't ask those questions unless you're being difficult with them. So if you're being difficult and you're saying yes, no, or argumentative, and they're not getting good broadcast, that's when they pull out those nasty questions. So first of all, be aware of what those bear traps might be. So just reflect a little bit on what you put on Twitter, what you put on Facebook, and assume the journalist knows that. But don't be nasty with the journalist. Have that conversation, because there's always the risk they pull out those bear traps if you don't. So, you know, to a lot of the points that Tett's saying there, it's down to the prep. You know, Tett as the journalist is doing his prep for a good interview. You need to do your prep. What might the journalist have up their sleeve? Who is your audience? What do they want to hear? And then what are the messages that you want to land and you're going to drive the interview forward on? But, you know, be confident. You are needed by the journalist more than you need the journalist.
Okay. I mean, one of the issues that comes up is we're getting press releases all the time. I see way too many. Well, there's the point. Don't make them too long, because for you, it's one press release. For a journalist, it's one of 50 they're looking at in that day. So give us a break, okay? Get to the point. Now, the next thing is that what kind of press releases appeal to me? I love press releases that tell a story. We had a beautiful one out this morning about a 14-year-old girl, young teen, 14, who's just started a cosmetic brand during lockdown when she couldn't go to school. And she worked with her mum, who was a single mother, and had a holiday job before with a local company. And she's come out with this brand of I think it's a skincare products and so on and so forth. But I saw that press release and I thought, yeah, that's a fantastic story straight away. And what that story hung on was the story being told by this 14-year-old. So a lot of earned coverage is about storytelling. Every story is about you, the protagonist, having a challenge, facing the challenge, finding a solution, and here's a solution that we've got. That's a great story. I'll tell you what isn't a story. Buy this thing and it costs you $15.99 and we'll give you 10% off if you pay in good time. That's not a story, that's a pitch. So these press releases that appeal to me are the ones that give me something of a story. Now, everybody's going to ring up, you know, that young lady and the person who's helping her with media and saying, look, can I speak with her? In fact, I think the press release went out and within 30 minutes, 5 journalists had called her asking for interviews. 5 journalists had called her asking for interviews. So the press releases that catch your attention are the ones that give you an outline of a story. The second thing is, the press releases that catch my attention are the ones that are timely and relevant. This press release was relevant because one of the biggest problems we'd had was what to do with young people while they weren't in school. We needed to do something with them, help them to go ahead and not lose their educational time, at any rate, create value. It was relevant to an emerging social problem nationwide. So there we are. That story was relevant again. Then also the angles that the thing came from was, her angle was, I just wanted to take charge of my life. I wanted to do something because I felt, you know, she'd read about mental health problems that people were facing, kids were getting depressed, and so on and so forth. I wanted to take charge of my life. What's not to like? So the press releases that get my attention aren't price pitches. They're ones that tell stories that are relevant and that have angles that are humanly engaging. Now, if you want to know how to earn coverage, that's exactly how you earn coverage. And people forget, because you're all being superstars, because you're all being amazing rock stars in the challenges you face and manage to overcome and do your business, you think, well, for you, it's just grist to the mill. It's just, you know, it's what I do. Actually, these are compelling stories. And when people read them, they feel invigorated. They feel inspired. Now, from my point of view as a journalist, that's the sort of content I want to put out, because it will be read. It will be shared, because when people have a good experience, it's like going to a restaurant. The first thing you tell people is, wow, have you tried that restaurant over there? Or you go and see a great movie. First thing you tell people is, have you seen this movie? It's natural. It's just a question of recommendation. So please think of your stories, think of your press releases as storytelling opportunities. You don't have to tell everything. That's what the phone back is there for.
So I'm sitting there now. I'm feeling the vibes of the businesses as you're talking here, Ted, because my guess is a lot of the people watching this now are saying, "Great, I know what the journalist wants. How the devil do I get it to the journalist?" Right? And I'm feeling that as I'm sort of watching you and talking to you. I'm going to pick 2 or 3 things that you just said there. In terms of positioning what you're putting out there, Ted, you've used the words of story and relevant. All right. Really, really, really important, right? So I know, and hopefully we're now getting the message out to the people watching this now that says, if I'm going to put something out there, it has to be relevant, right? And what we mean by relevant is your timing's right, and it's aligning to the news that's going on at the moment. So the example Ted gave just now about one we saw go through Journal this morning, very relevant in terms of the running news trends at the moment, and the timing is right. Good time to put it out. So got to be relevant. We see quite a few press releases going through journaling, which are a company has a new finance director. Actually, it might be really important, that finance director, but nobody cares, right? What they care about is a story and something that's trending in the news. And those stories can hit 2 different angles. One, you can be looking for a national audience. And what I've found is the national audience is looking for a really good news angle that's really relevant. They don't really care about you as a business, but they care about that news angle. And then there's more of a sort of regional and a sector angle, where the regional journalists are more interested in the great good news story of this great business in our locality that's doing great things. So that's not the big news story, but we really want to promote the business in our locality. So you can leverage that. So, have your eye on, is it national? Is it local? And how do you leverage those things? But the story and relevance is really important. Now, how do you get it out there? I'm just going to grab, this is not meant to be an advertorial, but I am going to use JournalLink as an example here, because as a business, what you look for is, right, how do I do it? How do I make it easy? Because we all think PR is a black art. It's too difficult. I don't know what to write. I don't want to put it out. I don't know what the trending news is. All those sort of things. Look for a platform that can help you do that. JournalLink is one of those platforms. As I say, it's not going to be a great advert, but it's a good example about, the sort of platform you're looking for. You don't want to spend a bundle of money because your budgets are always tight. So look for an inexpensive platform like JournalLink. Look for something that's easy to use, but also look for a platform that will give you an easy way to distribute your press release, both in writing it and sending it to the correct journalists. And they're there. JournalLink is a platform there that can help you do that and do most of the heavy lifting for you. All you need to do is bring the story and then put it on the platform, press the button, and it goes. So you're looking for something that's easy to use, it's there for you to use, and that will get the right messages out and the right story out to the right journalists. But always have firmly in your mind the relevance and the story. Now, the best time to hit a journalist in terms of relevance is when they are writing an article themselves and they're looking for a case study. So there's 2 ways that you can hook a journalist, right? One is you send something to Tet in his email box, and he's absolutely right. You'll get 2-3 seconds, something like that, of his attention span. So make sure your headline, when you send it out, is really good. Make sure your headline isn't more than about 40 characters, because that's when the headline on his iPhone will run out. So he wants to be able to see very quickly, is this relevant to me? Do I press the button to see more? So when you send it out, it's got to be relevant. You're trying to hook him. But when he's actually writing a story or looking for somebody to come on his program tonight, that's when you can really get him, because he really needs you then. So look for something as well where you've got a platform that's asking you for your involvement with the journalist. And that's one of the other things we do on JournalLink. There's 1 or 2 others that are out there as well. One of the other things that we do there is send you emails of a journalist is looking for a business for an article about this now, and then you simply reply to that. So there's 2 ways that you hook the journalist. One is stuff that you are putting out down the distribution route, and the other way is replying to their requests for case studies. And if you can get one of those case studies they're asking for, it's almost a slam dunk they're going to use you. They really seriously need you at that stage. I mean, how often do you use that route, Tet, in terms of trying to find somebody to add to your articles?
Constantly. I mean, everybody has a book of people that they've used in the past, But there are two things. You mustn't recycle them too often. Otherwise, they look as if they're the only, 10 people that you know in this world. You need to look as if you've got the breadth. And secondly, you're always looking for fresh content. So when a business gets in touch with a journalist, you've got to understand that you're actually knocking against an open door. I'm looking for fresh content. I'm looking for fresh experience. Be confident about that. Now, if your email isn't open, if your email isn't responded to, it could be 1,000 things that happen to conspire against you. 1,000 things. Right down to the fact that that was my short day and it's my turn to pick up my daughter from school. I mean, that used to happen to me in those days when I was in that kind of situation. So you need to keep at it. You need to keep sending these press releases through to journalists. One day, the penny will drop.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. I mean, one of the things I learned in marketing, quite outside of the PR, is that your brand needs to get seen about 11 times before the person looking at it really takes any notice of it. And we do get businesses saying to us, look, if I send the first press release out, am I going to get on the first page, the front page of the Sunday Times? You're probably not. But we, in journaling, we have 3 or 4 of the Sunday Times journalists who are constantly asking us for case studies. By the time you put your 4th or 5th press release out, do you know there's half a chance that you will get picked up then? But don't be impatient with it and expect it to happen on the very first occasion. And it takes time. We talked a bit about prep today. We talked a bit about getting good at doing this sort of thing. It took me about 6 or 7 years of me doing interviews. And okay, I was in a tough role doing it. But before you really feel confident about, you're landing it and you're getting it absolutely right, it takes a bit of prep time and a bit of work to make sure you do get it right. So I'm just watching the clock here a little bit, and I know there's some questions coming in. And
sure.
Tet and I love just having these conversations now, and we can take over. So Chloe, I'm going to throw it back to you for a second and let you just pose some of those questions that have been coming in.
Fantastic, thank you both. Let's have a look at some of the questions we've had come in. One from Andy saying, how do you track down people looking for case studies?
Look, there's various ways you do this. So typically Tet would be the guy who is looking for somebody to come on to his program tonight. We get them coming through from the BBC, we get them coming through from the Sunday Times, and a whole raft of different writers. The way you do it, quite simply, is if you're a subscriber to a platform that's taking those requests and putting them out. So what we do in journaling, for instance, is the journalist will ask us for a case study and we shoot that out through the email route to any of the people that are using JournoLink that we think will be relevant for that response. And we turn that round in something like 2 minutes. We had a case a few months ago where a Radio 4 one came through, and within 4 minutes of the BBC asking for somebody to go on tomorrow's program, the business had already had the phone call from the BBC and they'd got them booked for tomorrow because we shot the request through, they replied, and the journalist phoned up and we had them booked for the next day. So really you need to be using a wire. If you don't want to pay, I mean, the journaling platform is about £50 a month for you to use it for everything you need for your PR. But if you don't want to pay that, then sit on Twitter. It's a bit time consuming for you to do that, which is why we sort of encourage a lot of people to use the platform that we have. But the requests will go through Twitter. So you spend a lot of time doing that, but you've got to watch out for them. What we try and do in journaling is prompt you for them rather than you sitting there sort of watching for them, save your time.
We call them media requests.
Yeah, we call them media requests. There's a couple of other people that do that as well. Some are a lot more expensive than we are and tend just to go to the PR agencies. We focus very much about getting those requests directly to the businesses.
We've had a few questions come in around content for press releases. So one from John that says, if we had a piece of content in video form that shows a bit about the background of the business, would a press release with a video link be okay to send, or would you ignore clicking the link?
That's a really good question, actually, John. What I've seen happening over the last 20 years or so is actually a move into the sort of social media sphere. What you've got with the video is something you can put quite well, and people have become very used to putting that into social media. We encourage people not just to send a video link out to a journalist, for various reasons. One, it'll block their email address up pretty quickly, and that will annoy them more than anything else. But more than that, you've got to hook them in that 2 or 3 seconds and not get them to watch your video for 5 minutes about your corporate strategy. You're also trying to land 2 or 3 really sharp messages here, and you've got to do that within 200 or 300 words. Not expect a journalist to watch this for 5 minutes to get a handle on what you're trying to get through the video. So my inclination would be, if you got your video, that's fantastic, but put a press release out aligned to that, and then in the notes to editors, that's where we put the link to the video. So you've landed your message in your press release, and if the journalist then wants to see more, then they can go and have a look at the video. I mean, one of the things we do when we send it out through JournoLink, we don't just send the press release out blindly. We also send a package to the journalist if they want to look more, which has got previous releases you've sent out. We send them your running Twitter feed. We send them details about the business. So there's more stuff there, and a video is just an extra piece that's in there. But, do the work for the journalists. And I'll keep coming back to, this is paid, this is earned PR. It's not just, there you go, journalist, there's a pile of stuff, please make something out of it for me and make me look.
See, I'm busy enough already. So you need to, like Hansel and Gretel, you need to drop me the breadcrumbs to lead me to where I want to go. And that is really the body of your press release. Within notes to the editor, which are really, really useful, you can send me links to data, information, in this case, videos, and so on. But you've got to set my head straight about what's in the press release by giving me the story, what you're trying to say, and getting me enthused. Actually, if I'm not enthused, there are 1 zillion videos out there. I really won't be watching your video, and that is really, really important. The other thing about connecting with press releases is that when you write a press release, it forces you to actually think through what it is, the message that you're trying to give. Forces you to think through the message that you're trying to give, because every press release has to have a big idea that you're trying to convey. Now, if that big idea chimes, the story in it chimes, you're in. Then and only then do all the other things become relevant. Second point I think I ought to make is that they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. There are times when the story isn't that compelling, but the picture you put in there is drop dead amazing.
Yeah.
That can earn you a picture caption. So it's always worth investing in a few high-res images of your product, your company, you at work, a day in the life of your business, whatever. A few high-res images are really, really, really useful and will help you get coverage for yourselves.
And sticking with the theme of what to include in a press release, we've had a question from Maeve saying, do you send a summary in the email and then fully copy an attachment for a press release? Is that the best way that you would recommend?
I've just seen that actually from Maeve, and I was just going to pick up on that. So thanks, Chloe, for picking that up. What we actually do in JournoLink is we send the headline out to journalists together with the first part of the release. So, and again, if you go into JournoLink, there's sort of tips and tricks on how you write your press release. But what the journalist sees is the headline and then the first bit of the release. And if they want more, that's when they click more to get the full story. We handle all of that. And that really sort of puts into focus the need to get a good, catchy headline, so you really catch their attention, but also to put in the first 2 or 3 sentences the real story about what you're going to give me a little bit more meat on as we go down the release. So the positioning of that's really, really important. The other thing to mention there, Maeve, which is quite key, I think, is that Tet will get 70, 80, 90 emails a day, either from a newswire that's just spamming him with a load of stuff, or from businesses he's never heard of. We went through, when we first set Journaling up a few years ago, we went through quite a few iterations about how we hook the journalist best for you. And the best way we found is that the release actually goes out to the journalist in your business name. And then we put after your business name in brackets via journal link. And the feedback we've got from that is that the journalists love seeing the business name there, but also they need to know it's come through an authentic distribution means as well. So they know it's not just an advert, or they know it's not spam or whatever it is. So the way we push it out by way of the business name via journal link seems to be the best way for you to get the attention. So, I'd encourage you to do it in that way rather than just sending an email. If you know the journalist personally and you've built a relationship with the journalist, then it's fine to send them the personal email with, "This is my news, I'm sending it out today." And you might just be sending it to that one journalist. But if you're trying to get the attention of people who aren't known to you, then it's well worth just using a platform where there is some authenticity with the platform, and let them handle how it gets distributed.
We've had quite a few questions in with regards to is there a directory for journalists, and how do we submit press releases? So I have included a link to the Journalink website in the comment section, so you can click on there and find out a bit more information. Kind of extending on that, we've had a question come in from Sally about social media with press releases. So she said, is there a question of tweeting hashtag press PR request and hoping that journalists pick it up? She said that her business is more suited to Instagram rather than Twitter. So what's your thoughts on that?
Ted, you're the expert on the social side, so here you go.
Okay. Increasingly, we are beginning to look at Instagram, but it depends on the kind of news that you're putting out. Instagram is slightly female-centered and definitely younger orientated. However, since the pandemic blew up, what's happening is that older people are coming on Instagram and bigger businesses are coming on Instagram. So yes, Instagram is a very important platform. But I would say for speed and reference, Twitter is where a lot of journalists are, whether they're young or they're old. Twitter is where a lot of journalists are, but Instagram is the emerging star in all of this. So yes, you can do that and go on Instagram, but it is very much, if you're on these social sites, you've got to understand that you're broadcasting this very, very broadly. Now, I might look as a journalist on hashtag PR request, hashtag journal request, hashtag media request, and occasionally I pick something up from there. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think it's quite useful to be able to hook up with any of the platforms that are specialists in putting material out to journalists. One of the reasons I like those platforms is that I get less spam from them than I get from individuals who are emailing me. That is the most appealing thing about going through an established platform, say like Journaling, and there are others as well. So that's what's attractive about it. But by all means, sure. I mean, hashtag your requests onto Instagram and Twitter. By all means, do.
Chloe, there's a couple of questions coming in that I can just see on the chat there. One around, do I need a subscription before I can use it? So let me just cover that off. Again, we've been through a lot of iterations on Journaling as we've gone through our journey. You can register for free on it. Once you've registered on it, and frankly, anybody watching now that's interested in PR, do register on it, because there is no cost whatsoever for you to do that. And once you're registered on it, then you can absolutely have a look around it. There are some free components there for you to use once you've registered on it. One of those is the media room. There's the knowledge base that you can use. So there's a lot of good stuff in there, even without you paying a penny. The only time we ask you to pay is actually when you want to distribute a press release or when you want to respond to journalists, because obviously we have time and cost in supporting you do that.
Putting that together.
But yeah, but do go on and register because you can have a good look around it, and there's no cost whatsoever and no commitment for you to do it. In the context of commitment, one of the things we don't do is ask you to sign up for 12 months. So, if you use it a month and it's not for you, then you can walk away and there's no commitments for it. So, we genuinely are small business facing, and we absolutely get small business budget. One of the bits in that connection, in that context that's come in as well, I think, is if I'm looking just to target regional journalists, local journalists, can I do that? And can I just do sectoral targeting? Absolutely, you can. You can have your own lists up there as well. You can bring your own list of journalists in. You can say, I just wanted to go to a certain area, certain region, or I wanted to go nationally. So you can absolutely do all of that. And the flexibility is there within the platform to do that. So that's taken us to silence, Chloe. What else have we got?
So we've had another one come in, a question coming from Joanne saying, as there seem to be more freelance journalists now, I find it hard to build and maintain relationships compared to the old days when I had a list of go-to publications. What's the best way to build a network that might be of interest in content when many journalists seem to have a broad reach?
Okay.
Ted.
See, the structure of the industry has changed completely, and if you look at the big platforms, everybody's a freelancer. Everybody is on a short. There are those who are on a short contract, but there are far more who are working as freelancers. So the point is, whenever you make a connection with a journalist, you need to keep that contact alive and prepped, and you do that best by occasionally getting in touch with them, because you never know. I mean, they might have left the country, they might have moved on to another platform, might have become a full-time journalist and so on and so forth. But again, that's the sort of heavy lifting that we help people to solve. That's the sort of stuff we do to save people the grief of having to keep their own book. I really encourage you to stay in touch with a journalist, because once you've got one, the ones that you've got will serve you well forever, and they will be the route onto other journalists as well. But that's why platforms like JournoLink exist. And as I say, I mean, you can try it. If it's not working for you, go back to your old habits, but stay in touch with the journos that you have worked with in the past. And you do that by every now and again dropping them a line. Also, once you're connected with a journalist, they will likely have a LinkedIn or a Twitter feed. Connect with them there. That way, you know that whichever platform they move to, from now into perpetuity, you are always keeping up with them, always following them. And don't forget this, I know exactly who's following. I've got quite a few followers, but I know who those people are. And it's much more likely for me to connect with you, open your email, if I know who you are.
And it's not just freelancers either. You know, more and more it's bloggers as well that you need to be targeting. And that's when Twitter is so important. And you know, when we distribute the press releases, we don't just send it out to journalists. We also put it on our own Twitter feeds and distribute through our Twitter feeds. And you know, we've got the best part of 10,000 followers on the platform, and a lot of those are bloggers. So when we try and track who's actually writing about you or taking an interest in you, about 60% of the interest that we see through our platform is coming through bloggers and through the social feeds. So you know, don't close your eyes to the blogger sphere as well as the freelancers as well.
Yeah, I mean, some research has been done which indicates that even though you'll go on a mainstream media national title like the Times, the Telegraph, the BBC, ITN, and so on and so forth, they are good for reputation. But actually, in terms of shifting product, influencers and bloggers are the most important thing you will ever do. So please don't downgrade them, because I just know that when I talk to people and I say, well, look, have you thought about this blog, or have you thought about that blog? The thing about bloggers is that they're in business because they've got a massively loyal audience, especially the influencers on Instagram. They have a massively loyal audience. And it's that interaction between journalists and their audience that you are after. So please don't disregard or don't discard bloggers. I think going forward, they will be the most important people in media.
Yeah, Chloe, there's one that's coming from John, I think, that I've just seen there on the chat around the images. John, yeah, high-res image, really, really important. Low-quality image will really annoy a journalist, so high-res image is good. When we distribute through Journaling, simply you just drag that onto the press release before you distribute it. So we attach it to the press release and the journalist sees that and can use it. Your point about can you use good stock photos? Yes, you can, but be careful and make sure you own that. So the last thing that you
Copyright.
need doing it, yeah, absolutely. Don't get caught out by copyright. Anything that you put on your press release, make sure you own it. We, over the time we put, I don't know, the best part of 7,000 or 8,000 press releases through Journaling. We've only ever had one where we've seen the business that puts it out get caught. And this was somebody, it was an article that went in the Daily Mail with a picture. And about a year after the event, the photographer who took that picture, even though it was of the person, the business owner, claimed it was theirs, and the business owner didn't own copyright to it. So you run quite a risk if you use an image that actually is not your own image. So just have an eye to that if you're using stock photos.
I've just seen this question here. For local stories, should I write a press release with the expectation that it might be used word for word? Okay, that is the definition of failure for a journalist. That's why you don't have to be William Wordsworth or Shakespeare to write a press release. You just need to be able to write plain English with good grammar and don't spell my name wrong. Okay, so that is what is really required. And give me a good story. It's for the journalist to craft the story, but put across the points you want to make clearly, succinctly, so that I don't need to spell check you before I make sense of your document. Now, so when you send a press release, it won't be put in word for word. The only thing that goes in word for word is an advert. That's why you pay for it. A press release is a story idea that a journalist picks up and goes with. Okay. Usually they will want to make contact with you to stand up any facts, because if you make outrageous claims in it and the journalist repeats it, what happens? The journalist looks like an idiot later on. So usually they will have to fact check to a degree, make sure, contact you, see who you are, see what you're about, and satisfy themselves that the content of this is okay. At the minimum, they would have to do that. But once you've done that, you just don't print press releases word for word. It doesn't happen. So what you're doing is painting a picture.
I'm just going to push back a little bit on that, to be honest.
Yeah.
This has been the the confident interviewee here, looking at the journalist.
Yeah.
One thing to bear in mind, Maeve, on this is, and so I'll say it to everybody, don't put anything in print or don't say anything that you would not want to be seen
repeated
in the public domain, right? So, the camera is never off, the microphone is never off, nothing is ever off the record. So only put in your words what you would be happy to be taken and used word for word. And we have seen the odd occasion, particularly with online news channels, where we've seen a press release go out and the next minute it's on a news channel, an online news channel, where you can see it's just been copied and pasted. I remember one, actually, there was a spelling mistake in one that went out through the press release distribution through Journaling, and that same spelling mistake appeared in the article. So sometimes these journalists can be pretty lazy and just say, I'll have that coverage. But the real learning point there, Maeve, is don't put anything out unless you're happy for it to be used word for word. Just in that context as well, if anybody is nervous about writing a press release, we can write that professionally for you. We've got a service within Journaling that just give us the brief and we'll get it professionally written for you. There's a small cost, but it's not stupid. Or you can get a copywriter to do it, or you can get a university, English grad to write it for you. So you need to get it writing. So rather than spend hours worrying about writing it yourself, there's others that can do that if you just give them the brief. But make sure what you put out there, you're happy could be copied and pasted onto a newswire somewhere.
Claire, finally, I've just seen one here which says, I'm one of the Journaling members. I'd like to know how to help my business. Go and look at our content. Go to our Facebook. We've got lots of Facebook Lives. These are short 6, 7, 8 minute videos, which all of all of which talk about your content, all of which talk about storytelling, all of which talk about how to earn coverage from the media. So follow our stuff look at our videos on Facebook, and also follow the tweets that we put out. Read our blog.
There's a final one just coming from John asking about journaling being UK. Yeah, we're predominantly UK based, John. The platform can go globally. If you have journalists that you want to distribute to specifically that you know in other jurisdictions, very easy for us to do that. But our journalist database, we have about 10,000 journalists on the database. They predominantly are aimed at the small business market in the UK rather than oil exploration in Africa, if I can be as extreme as that.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Peter and Tet, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. We've had so many great questions and we've run out of time. I'm sure our audience will agree that was a fantastic session. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
Look, from my side, as I say, there's no cost to registering. We are absolutely passionate about supporting small businesses and getting their stories out to the media. The media need them. So, please do go on, register, have a look round. And if we can help you, we'd be delighted to. If we can't help you, that's fine.
And, I'd say to everybody that these are tough times. It's not easy for anybody. But by telling your stories through the media, actually, we can talk ourselves out of the problem. We can talk ourselves up, or we can talk ourselves into a massive recession. And the media has a part in doing that. And the media can't do it without your input. Please feel confident to engage with the media. It's how your business will grow.
Go and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have included Peter and Tet's LinkedIn profile in the comments section, a link to the JournoLink website. So if you have any questions, they can be answered there. And I've also included a link to the JournoLink Facebook page and business support group as well. So please head over to those links and check them out. Our next webinar in the Lockdown for Learning Business series takes place on Friday, the 25th of September at 2 p.m. with Jake Walsh, as we'll be discussing protecting brand equity on marketplaces. If there is anything you'd like to catch up on from today's session, we'll be sending out a replay of the webinar coming at 5 p.m. today. You can find the replay and future webinars at www.freshbusinessthinking.haysummit.com or by clicking on the link in the comments section. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you again, Peter and Tet.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Hope you enjoyed it.